What does it mean to call a movie mythical? Some movies have an obvious mythical quality. In others, it is not so apparent. But whether a story occurs outside time and space, or in the here and now, it holds no less mythic potential, because the mythical is not limited to the fantastic and wondrous. All great storytelling is built upon the principles of myth, from the most extraordinary to the most mundane. Myth is what makes a story more than just a story. Myth infuses narratives with power and meaning. It is the secret appeal behind our favorite genres and our most iconic characters. Myth makes pop culture a meaningful part of human culture, as stories share our collective ideas, values, and beliefs. In the following series of videos, we will investigate what it means to call a story mythical, the ways popular movies constitute a modern mythology, and how a storyteller may elevate their own work to mythic levels of power and meaning. Join us on our mythical journey. To figure out what makes a movie mythical, we must first understand what myth really means. When most people hear the word myth, they think of stories from ancient civilizations involving gods and monsters, stories that seem incomprehensible to our modern day. But we must first distinguish dead myths from a living myth. The stories of gods and monsters are dead myths. Dead because the time and place that engendered them has disappeared into the dust of time, leaving their stories as nothing more than a bunch of curious skeletons. But at one time these were living myths, stories filled with profound social value and meaning, through which a people made sense of their world and their place within it. To quote anthropologist Branislaw Malinowski, myth fulfills in primitive culture an indispensable function. It expresses, enhances, and codifies belief. It safeguards and enforces morality. It vouches for the efficiency of ritual and contains practical rules for the guidance of man. Myth is thus a vital ingredient in human civilization. It is not an idle tale, but a hard-worked act of force. It is not an intellectual explanation or artistic imagery, but a pragmatic charter of primitive faith and moral wisdom. But this statement can't be limited to so-called primitive societies, as myth remains an active force in every corner of the world today. Myths contain the ideas, values, and beliefs that shape societies, determine their directions, and influence daily behaviors. In other words, myth is the backbone of culture and the glue that holds a people together. Thus, according to Joseph Campbell, a functioning mythology can be defined as a corpus of culturally maintained sign stimuli fostering the development and activation of a specific type or a constellation of types of human life. In less technical language, Richard Slotkin states that a myth's purpose is to reconcile and unite individualities into a collective identity. A myth that ceases to evoke this sense of total identification and collective participation ceases to function as a myth. A tale that through repetition acquires this kind of evocative power has evolved into a myth. To put this another way, myths are the centers of gravity in the ebb and flow of our cultural existence. Some myths have influenced human behavior for millennia, while others seem to rise and fall in a matter of months. Likewise, some myths we are conscious of, while others reside deep in our unconscious, influencing us in ways we cannot realize. But a myth and a story that expresses that myth are not the same thing. See, a true myth is a complete abstraction in the collective cultural mind. It's formless and thus defies the power of words to describe. Take, for example, a society's idea of perfect justice. It's impossible to fully articulate this idea, seeing that to start, justice is itself an abstract concept which resists simple definition. The idea may be intuitively felt by the people, but it cannot be accurately described in words. Since myths are complete abstractions, they can only be expressed indirectly through something which does have form or language, something like a story. However, to proceed from here, we must mark the difference between the mythical and the mythological. Seeing that myths are complete abstractions, humanity can only engage with its myths through imperfect but more easily accessible means, through representative words, symbols, or secondary ideas. We thus remove ourselves one step into the realm of the mythical. The mythical is anything which refers to a myth, but is not the myth itself. But the capacity of words and symbols is limited, and thus the mythical falls short in its communication. So humanity must remove itself one step further into the realms of the imagination, depicting the mythical in art, in ritual, and in narrative storytelling. We have now entered the domain of the mythological. The mythological is an attempt to express a myth in an alternative language that human beings may potentially understand. As Joseph Campbell states, the ultimate truth, being without attributes, cannot be contemplated by the mind. Therefore, attributes are assigned to it. A mythology is a rendition of forms, through which the formless form of forms can be known. An inferior object is presented as the representation or habituation of a superior. The mythological operates not unlike our unconscious mind when we dream. In dream, the unconscious transforms abstract emotions, anxieties, and desires into representative images and actions. Thus, it finds a way to express what is essentially inexpressible. Dreams are ciphers of symbol, metonymy, and metaphor through which the abstract is given a physical form. A mythology uses similar means to express a society's concerns, anxieties, and emotions. Thus, a mythology can be considered the dreams of a society as a whole. Only unlike the dream that remains incomprehensible to the dreamer, a mythology goes one step further, consciously shaping dream imagery into a narrative that has the appearance of coherent logic, order, and meaning, turning the mythical into something our intellect may indirectly understand. To wit, Hayden White claims, narrative might well be considered a solution to a problem of general human concern, namely the problem of how to translate knowing into telling. As such, a true myth is defined by its dual nature. A myth is not only a conceptual idea, but also a proto-narrative. That is, it possesses a rated capacity to be expressed in narrative form. Let's say we're told, work hard and follow the rules and you'll succeed in life. This statement presents a value-laden mythical idea while simultaneously suggesting narratives of persons who indeed succeed through hard work. In this way, the myth is self-illustrating. This capacity to be both idea and story is at the root of myth's social power. For while abstract arguments are difficult for even the most educated mind to understand, even children can understand stories. It's thus chiefly through stories that mythical ideas are communicated and disseminated through a society. Mythical narratives are therefore a force which holds a society together. All stories communicate, implicitly or explicitly, ideas on how people should behave, what they should value, and what they should believe. According to Malinowski, stories are so effective for this purpose because stories establish the illusion of precedent. By depicting events which have imaginatively happened in the past, a story creates the illusion of a precedent, a sense of evidence for the lesson the story wishes to convey. In other words, if you are told many stories about people who succeed by working hard and following the rules, you are more likely to believe in that idea based on all the supposed evidence contained in those stories. The story legitimates the idea, but these statements may cause one to believe that myth is inherently manipulative. Thus, we must examine the relationship between myth and truth. Here we run into another common misuse of the term myth. Myth is often used to refer to an idea which is factually false, such as myth of the low-carb diet or myth of the Loch Ness Monster. However, myths are not about empirical facts. A true myth can be neither proven nor disproven, only believed in or disavowed. This is because myths are not about factual truth, truth with a small t, but big truth with a capital T. And big truth operates in the realm of belief. Let's return again to my example. Those who work hard and follow the rules succeed in life. In terms of factual evidence, this statement is questionable. I'm sure we could identify numerous real-world cases to both support and contradict this idea, but this is not what is important. What is important is whether enough persons believe this idea to be truthful, to a point that it guides and influences their daily lives. Myths give a course for action whenever available evidence is questionable or lacking. Wherever we find doubt or uncertainty, myth bridges the gaps to construct a solid sense of truth as a guide for thought and action. This is especially important in purely philosophical areas of human existence. Scientific facts do not apply here. Nevertheless, we need a set of beliefs and the suggestion of truth to provide certainty for our behaviors. Thus, a mythical idea holds truth when a significant portion of persons believe in it as a valid source of value and meaning. While this belief may one day be undermined by historical change or the accumulation of factual evidence, causing fewer people to believe in the myth, in the meantime, the myth has the power to move an entire society. Yet once we realize that a myth is capable of moving the masses with an idea which is neither factually true nor false, we might begin to wonder, why do we even need myths? Why do we essentially create a world of constructed illusions? Why not simply do away with all myths and live purely on empirical fact? Well, the truth is, the world without myths is a terrifying place. The human species began as naked apes shivering in the rain. Life was constant fear and confusion in a world of inexplicable phenomena, with each day simply a struggle to survive to the next. But eventually, man got a brain big enough to realize, if I could just figure out why things happen, I could gain some control over my life. Thus began the core trait of the human species. Our survival has been dependent upon our search for order and meaning. Yet the bigger our brains grew, the more humanity realized how much it did not understand. There were bigger mysteries. Mysteries about birth and death, sickness and suffering, the forces that control nature, and the human capacity for good and evil. And these bigger questions brought as much fear and anxiety as when humanity shivered in the rain. So they needed answers. So here's the miracle of humanity. and the basis of all culture and civilization. Whenever human beings can't come up with a definite answer to a question, we simply make one up for ourselves. That is, wherever knowledge falls short, we compensate with belief. This then is the source of mythological thought, the human quest to turn a chaotic and frightening world into a world of order and meaning. As Richard Slotkin states, man is essentially a myth-making animal. He naturally seeks to understand his world in order to control it, and his first act encompassing this end is an act of mind or the imagination. On the basis of limited, finite experience, he creates a hypothetical vision of a universal, infinite order. Myths and their stories are our way of making sense of the world. We need guidance, understanding, and explanation in order to attain a sense of control. And when faced with the terror of the truly unknown, any explanation, no matter how fantastic, is preferable to no explanation at all. And so, as Frank Kermode explains, we make up adventures to make our own human clocks tick in a clockless world. And we take a man who is by definition unwelcome and create a context in which he isn't. In other words, myths fill the gaps to explain the unexplainable and provide proof that the world has order and meaning, and that human beings have a place in that orderly and meaningful world. And when myth becomes story, this goes one step further, because by their very form, stories are oriented towards order and meaning. Stories are structured. They have a clear beginning, middle, and end, and everything in them happens for a reason. Stories are not designed to present the world as it is, but as we would like it to be. A coherent world of order and meaning. And though modern science and reason have done away with the need for many earlier mythologies, there still remain many profound questions that science and reason will never be able to answer. Questions like, what is the purpose of our existence? How do we find happiness? How can we create an ideal society amongst all of its problems? What is justice? What is love? And why is there still so much evil? We remain now, as ever, in need of mythical stories to explain our world and give us a sense of order and meaning. In fact, Joseph Campbell asserts that whenever society loses touch with its myths, or the old myths become obsolete, the society will fall apart, which is something on a personal note I believe has been happening since the turn of the millennium. So storytellers hold a great responsibility to their world. However, to engage in mythic storytelling isn't a choice on the storyteller's part. It's unavoidable. Whether you realize it or not, all good storytelling is rooted in the principles of myth. Screencraft tends to relegate the mythic to the topic of theme, and thus usually treats it as something secondary to plot and character. But once again, Screencraft gets things backwards, as it is actually theme that is the generating force of plot and character. Most of the time, storytellers are unaware of this. While some writers do go about with the conscious intent of expressing a certain meaning, most simply want to create an entertaining story. But with every choice the writer makes concerning plot or character, they draw upon personal and social ideas regarding what is good or bad, what is right or wrong, the way the world is, and how the world should be. In other words, they unknowingly draw upon the mythical ideas surrounding them in their society, creating in a sense a mythological narrative of their own, which expresses those ideas through plot and character. Therefore, cinema is by default a modern mythology. So what makes a movie mythical? All movies have the potential to be mythical, regardless of their setting or content, as long as they use plot and character to express attitudes, ideas, and beliefs that give life a sense of order, value, and meaning. But with this must come a warning to the storyteller. When successfully used, mythical narratives are capable of motivating the greatest good as well as the greatest evil. Often the same myth can bring both progress and destruction, depending upon how it's directed. So the question must be, what does your story say to the world? Does it promote love or hate, empathy or intolerance, hope or despair? Does it encourage society to better itself, or perpetuate harmful, outdated ideals? Myth is the power behind great storytelling, and with great
power comes great responsibility.
If you'd like to learn more, I've listed some of my sources in the description. Please make sure to like and subscribe for part 2, where we will look even deeper into how movies work as modern mythology. That's it for now. I'm the Script Monk. I'll see you next time.